Live. Oops, I'm not plugged in. I always mess something up. Can't see. Check. Yo, Frank, is my audio working? I just plugged up. I'm messing stuff up. I got dirt from the four-wheeler on my hat. What's up, boys? Good. I'm a couple days late on the live this week. I was unavoidably detained. So I figured I'd start by talking about the conversations I've been having in the chat. That seems to be it's funny how the same things happen over and over and over again. No, you didn't miss anything, Frank. I was just traveling. I was looking at ponds and doing some work, and my truck broke down. I had a wheel bearing go out. An old piece of junk truck I drive around, one of them anyway. And I had to drive back up and pick it up, and it's just yeah. Well, since you mentioned Headwaters, Frank, we can talk about Headwaters. I'm going to head down there this year. It's pretty far south from me here. I think it's like another 4 hours south of here. It was down there where I went and caught that peacock bass with Florida Bass Mistress. She was down there by Headwaters. But Headwaters is a perfect example of where we can start as big water, right? And how it transfers over to smaller waters or vice versa, how we can see how smaller waters and big waters are similar. But if you watch the headwaters lakes, and what I want to do is go actually measure. That's the title of this one, is actually taking the measurements. None of this is done by just guesstimate at all. Everything we calculate, everything we measure, everything we measure, all the fish we catch as a scientist and their weights. And we compare their lengths and the weights to a standard weight and calculate relative weight. And that kind of gives us a frame of reference to fish health. And it's certainly not the only way we calculate. There's other ways to calculate fish health, like they track numbers of fish captured per hour in electrofishing surveys, or catch per unit effort is what that means. Or you might see that abbreviated CPU or CPUE, catch per unit effort. Meaning all things being equal with a shocking boat, if you're shocking up 100 bass an hour versus 40 bass an hour, you see the point. You see density changes like that. Welcome in, Steve. We're talking about actually measuring fish and using the headwaters and using the relative weight. So what you'll notice in the headwaters, what you'll notice in ponds or small lakes or let's just talk about what I've seen and then use the headwaters. If you build a lake, and I've seen this many times, brand new lake, gets built, the fish get stocked, the fish grow well, usually no longer than 5 years or so. People typically won't listen to you and manage it right for the most part. You have a few guys that will, but for the most part, people kind of do what they want to do on that. And you'll see a shift in the fish population. You'll see a fish population that starts out being closer towards balanced and the fish growing very well, very similar to what we're seeing at Sugar Hill. And then you'll see that fish population start to change. And the important thing to understand at year 5 and year 6, the habitat that you install, the brush piles that you put in, whatever plants you have there, okay, none of that stuff has changed, but you'll see a significant change in the relative weight of the bass. You'll see a significant change in the growth of the fish. So, especially when you see it repeatedly, like every single lake, it's not a habitat issue that's causing the fish to not grow properly. It's a fish balance issue. It's literally like a fish numbers issue. You can't have more than 60 bass per acre and expect them to grow. When you start approaching 60 bass per acre, they stop growing. And that's just kind of how it works. If you stock it intentionally that way, they don't grow very well. If you let them spawn, overcrowd for whatever reason, they tend to naturally skew that way anyway. Catch and release only. Again, Headwaters Lake, catch and release only. So start watching the relative weights, not just the weight of the fish. Just holding up a fish and saying the fish is 9 pounds doesn't mean it's healthy to me, right? Let's pull a relative weight sticker and we'll see what I'm talking about, right? So we look at this sticker. If the fish is 25 inches long and 9 pounds, see that? I consider that healthy. If the fish is 27 inches long and 9 pounds, I do not consider that healthy. That's about at least 2 pounds light. So, just because of people again, going back to what I just said, guys coming on here and kind of making arguments about, well, the pond produced a 7-pound fish. Well, if the 7-pound fish was 27 inches long, that is not a healthy fish. That's not, you don't have a frame of reference. You don't have any data when you say things like that. Welcome aboard, everyone. Welcome in, Philip. Good to see you, boys. Let me go through the here. Oh, good. Thanks, Frank. I appreciate you. Kyle, welcome in. So what I'm getting at is, since the 90s, I've calculated relative weight on crap, if the crappie came up, or if they didn't. So there's one comparison we can use right there. Do an electrofishing survey, say on 10-acre ponds, and dozens of them I've done. I can compare the relative weight of the bass that I caught in the ponds that didn't have crappie because they weren't stocked in there versus the ponds that did. And you can list those weights out. You can write the measurements out of the fish and give me a relative weight. And I can show you the data set at which pond holds the crappie and which pond doesn't. It'll jump right out when you look at the data set. You'll just see suppressed growth. I mean, the other person that I know doing it real time, we have an example, is Philip Cheek right there, Philip Cheek Fishing. He sees it all the time too. It's a measurement, and you can literally measure and see it like a block of wood is 25 inches long. You need to measure that to make sure it's exact, and that's the difference. So when these guys come on, and most of the problems I've had on here with people not wanting to listen or kind of trying to argue is always around that frame of mind where the fish was 7 pounds or 8 pounds or 9 pounds, therefore the lake is healthy. And that's one of the mentalities we have to combat. Just because the lake threw off a 7-pounder doesn't necessarily mean that 7-pounder was a healthy fish. You got to calculate it. That's smallmouth sticker. So using a 7-pounder as an example, is the fish 23 inches long and 7 pounds? All right, that's a healthy fish. Is it 24 inches long and 7 pounds? See that? Where's my, right there. 24 and 7? That's a pound light. All right, that's not a healthy fish. It's not even close to being healthy when they're like that. I don't want them a pound under standard weight. That's terrible. That is me not doing my job very well if I'm managing that pond. again, in the real world, what's happening right now at Sugar Hill Outdoors. Let's use what the right here. The biggest fish we've grown so far is a little over 17 inches, and standard weight's 2.7 on the 17. And our fish are three of them at 17. We sampled so far 3.8, 3.9, and 4.1. So they can blow that standard weight out of the water in a balanced fishery like we've got on feed. Just dust it to the top side. They can also dust it to the bottom side and be half starved to death and not die. That's the problem with bass. They don't die. They'd be better off if they did. You can't keep trout in that condition. They die. Frank said he's got a lot of 2 to 4s in a pond and caught a big fish. It should have been over 5. It was only 4.7. Yeah, well, she could have had any number of things going on. Some fish are just unhealthy, you know. I've noticed that over the years too. Everybody wants to attribute the death of a fish to some reason. It's got to be like contamination, or it's got to be plastic, or it's got to be mishandling fish tournaments wise, or it's got to be. But you know what? I've never ever heard anybody say. Sometimes fish die. That's it. Sometimes animals die in the wild, especially wild animals. Their lifespans aren't long. They're not long for the world. And I don't know. I've just never seen anybody take that into account, that it could have just, like, one fish, you know, it could have just died just for whatever reason. Age, disease, who knows? Everybody dies. Got a question in from Steve. Have I heard of Kendall Gray? And man, I forgot to go live. I should have went live on StreamYard again so I could post these up and not have to read them. I will remember. He's building a pond, and yeah, do a collab. I'd be glad to help him. I'll go ahead and tell you, like, the collab. Well, it's not really a collab. But what I'm doing with Sugar Hill right now, I've got like complete control of it, and it's been very simple too. All right, I've stocked. I've had this conversation a few times, so that'll kind of touch on where we're at. I've stocked no supplemental forage. We stocked the pond initially with 1,000 bluegill per acre, and then I let them go. It wasn't quite a full year, but let them spawn in, get real heavy, fed the bluegill, and then about a year later, put bass in. That's pretty normal stocking strategy for new ponds. What you'll find, and what if you're new to this, you'll find it. If you've been following outdoor magazines and articles over the years for as long as I have, you'll have seen it many, many times. And it's where the outdoor article has a spin in a way that assists an industry. And the way that I see assist going in outdoor articles is through supplemental stocking, and like the way it's kind of like a fish hatchery writes an article that looks scientific, but it's actually just a propaganda to sell fish from a fish hatchery. I've seen that a lot. And I've seen the recommendations from the guys who sell fish be astronomical just to blow their fish sales up a lot. So, what you run into with these new pond projects is, and I tell you, I told Clint straight, you know, I was like, you have to do it my way. We're not going to play this game where you're the client and you're right, and where you're going to cut the check and stock the pond any way you want. I'm not going to do the job if you do it that way. That's the way most jobs go. The guy who writes the check generally gets what he wants, and he generally goes online and listens to a bunch of advice in chat rooms and not from professionals. And he messes it up. And the one thing that I've got going with this particular project is I didn't even take the job without understanding we're doing it my way. And my way is very simple. We're going to stock it once. We're going to feed it consistently. We're not going to introduce any new forage. We're not going to stock anything. It's a waste of money. And I've got bass and these aren't even F1 bass. Those are northern bass. I've got over 4 pounds in 2 years. That's pretty good. But I've done better. But you know what I've never ever seen? I've never seen a dude who doesn't listen to me, who goes and spends his money on crawdads. He goes and spends his money on shiners. He goes and spends his money on truckloads of shad. He goes and spends $10,000 on forage to stock the same size or comparable pond. He spends 10 times the money I spent. But you know what he doesn't get? He doesn't even get the growth I've got right now. Right? It's not even close because he'll inevitably, what those guys do is I'll tell them, you better stock 40 bass per acre. Well, that means they'll stock 80. And they do it over and over, just like the comments where we started this. The comments are always the same. The misinformation is always the same. It's always wrong in that way. It's always people stock ponds like that all the time. They don't listen and they just go wild spending. And the fish hatcheries know it and they take advantage of it. And so, like I said, 2 years, 4 pounds. We haven't stocked one additional fish. We haven't spent one nickel extra on a supplemental forage. And it's because it was to make a point. And that point is, okay, have you seen somebody spend a whole bunch of money on their pond? Did they outgrow me? Because you see what I'm getting at? They wasted their money. If they just listen, they'd get better growth and spend less money. Mainstream, what's up? Yeah, mainstream. You're right about that, dude. I'll see that a lot. Like because when guys get lake money, like when you start dealing with cats with like private lake money, whatever they're good at, they're really, really good at. Maybe they're a race car driver or a baseball player or a businessman, a lawyer, doctor, surgeon, whatever. All I've worked for guys like all those types of dudes. But the problem they have is they don't like live in a world where they're in charge. You know what I mean? It's like they're the shot caller in their world and they'll listen to you, but it's very rare they listen to you and follow everything. Like I said, they usually go and do a couple things that you really don't want them to do. But it is their lake and you can't stop them. And when you're doing it for a living too, it gets to be real catchy because it's like you don't want to stock a certain species of fish in there and they do. And it's kind of they're shooting themselves in the foot because they don't understand management. They want to do everything. They want to stock, stock, stock. Like stocking is going to somehow just stocking fish is going to make fishing better. It doesn't. But I don't know. It's a strange thing I've watched for 30 years. And people would just waste their money and waste their money and waste their money and waste their money. And it's kind of one of the reasons why I do this. It's like at least you can kind of learn and measure and go, hey, wait, why am I spending all this money on forage? My bass aren't getting any bigger. Oh, sure, Frank. Any business is that way. I've seen it in every business, all sectors, just like you said. I've seen it in every sector too. But I don't know. I just try to call them like I see them. We got dudes on here. I got a lot of dudes on here that are managing their ponds in one way or another, on their own and using the information and DMing or whatever. So, shout out to those dudes. And I just want them to have the truth. That's it. Let's exist in a world of reality. We're dealing with real world problems on real world projects, growing real fish, managing real ponds. James is writing in, says they like the podcast with Andrew about bluegill. Appreciate you on that, man. Bluegill are pretty tough, dude. Bluegill are brutal, tough, like tough fish. I mean, they are super sensitive as far as like their lateral line system and how their body can sense the environment. Super sensitive. But as far as like hardiness and like being able to haul them and stuff, bluegill are tough. Uh, One thing that you notice with them, they're mean to each other too. There's no love between them. Like if you haul them in a tank, inevitably, probably it depends on how many hours you have them in the tank. But literally, it doesn't take but a few hours, just 1 or 2 hours, and usually your hauls are a little longer than that. Uh, Most of the time, I would have them in the tank, sometimes up to 8 or 10 hours that day. But I try to haul fish and just get them all off my truck in one day, just one load when I did it. But they're eye biters. So if there's a like one of them in, they're all crowded in that tank. If one of them gets bumped or knocked into the side and it gets all woozy or something, gets bumped to jostle or something in the tank because they're all crowded, the others will sense it immediately and will bite and eat that fish that was not right. It's not acting right. It'll bite its eyes out and kill it, and you'll have half a dozen, 20 maybe. You'll have always have a few eye biters, dead bluegill in a tank when you're hauling them from that behavior. I don't know why when you crowd them they act like that, but they do. They're not like and get mad or something and get mean and bite each other's eyes out. So, but they don't do it when they're healthy. Like it'll only be the ones that get like bumped by the net or whatever. Yep, eye biters, man. Little boogers are mean. Sure are. Oh, did I miss something from Kyle? So sorry, Kyle. I'm not really following. I don't put vegetation in ponds. It's not necessary. It usually grows over and causes more problems than it's worth having. Uh, I've had so many pond. I can't even tell you how many dozens of times I've gone to a pond where somebody like put like lily pads or something in it, thinking that they were necessary, and now they've got a $20,000 lily pad bill because they can't see their lake because their pond, they're man-made structures, especially in Georgia. I mean, some places there are natural ponds, like here in Central Florida where I'm at, you'll find some natural ones, and some parts up north you'll find some natural ones. But when you're in the pond business, most of the time you're working on man-made projects. And for some reason, and I see that too, there's some more misinformation we can bring up online. So for some god dang reason, like people think that Mother Nature is going to take care of their pond if they just left it alone. And I'm like, what? That man-made the dam over there? Mother Nature piled that dirt up and created that dam and created that pond right there because it's a man-made structure, and that makes about as much sense to me as saying that Mother Nature's going to come mow your grass for you on the weekends and keep that trimmed up for you too. That's a man-made environment that never going to see that happen. So there's like this huge disconnect between what's actually what like two things we're looking at. Like I'm looking at a fish that's a pound under standard weight, to use a relative weight example, and saying that's a poor fish, and everybody else online is holding that same fish up and saying it's a healthy fish because it's 7 pounds. You see the difference? Same thing with the lakes and the algae and the weeds and all these things. Um, People make assumptions. You know, we'll keep it in the real world. I grew a bass to 4 pounds without hardly any weeds in the pond, and I've done it plenty of times. I've grown them bigger than that plenty of times with absolutely no vegetation in the pond whatsoever. Grass carp cleaning every bit of that stuff up. I use brush piles, gravel piles. I use other forms of habitat that can't grow my pond over and lake over and create a $10,000 or $20,000 bill on me, and so much unnecessary work and cost that it makes the job unmanageable. Um, when you start getting weed problems like that that cost so much to control, like there's the budget's blown just on weeds. Now you got no budget to manage the fish population, and you'll see that the weed problems actually cause problems with the fish population, and then there's no money after you clean the weed problem up to correct the fish population. And every single time, then the, the whoever's pond it was or lake it was blames the treatments for the fishing to be bad, but it was actually the weed problem that got way out of hand for all those years that created the problem with the fish population. The bass can't hunt in all those weeds, and in ponds where they're shallow and crowded like that, you can lose your fish population to a weed problem, and that's just a fact. That's just the truth. Um, I guess most people haven't seen that before because they sure argue like it never happens, but I've seen it plenty of times. Yeah, Kyle, I hear you, man. That managing ponds for overgrowth, that these guys are doing around here in Florida big time. They're just trying to keep the lakes from being completely overgrown by different salad bowl of 20, 30 different species, 100 different species of plants. I don't even know how many there are out there. Uh, it's a good place to learn about aquatic plants, Central Florida, because they got all of them. Two that haven't been identified, and all the rest. So it's a battle, you know. And I would say that was probably like tied for number one reason why lakes were messed up and ponds were messed up. One, people don't keep enough fish out of them. Usually let them get stunted. Or two, the pond got stunted because the weed problem created the stunted situation, and people didn't know that the bass population was stunted because of it and just stayed that way. And I saw that plenty of times. You stun it out with pond weed or some kind of submerged weed, and you know what the fish population is going to look like. And it's just a matter of going and looking at it, just doing it again and again and again, year after year after year, measuring, taking the measurements and writing those measurements down and looking at them on a sheet of paper and noticing, hey, these relative weights are low. These fish are not healthy. None of them, none of the bluegill, none of the crappie, none of the bass, nothing that comes out of this lake is a healthy weight. Everything's poor. Oh, but yeah, and also it had all the treatments for the last 36 months, and it had, you start going back in time and looking at what got you even out there is usually the weed control treatments. Everything's connected, especially in ponds. Frank's got a question. He says, can you count on plankton to consume nutrients if you design and manage the pond for that? Or do you always need riparian? All right, so that's a good question, Frank. Depends on where you are, and it depends on the nutrient load in the watershed. So, like using the example in Georgia that we're using right now, we're in an area that has very low limestone, very low water hardness, very low productivity because of it, which means it holds lower pounds of fish per acre. What we did was boosted it with the feeder, and by feeding those bluegill every single day, we've boosted it up to a place to the carrying capacity of a place that would have a higher uh, phytoplankton bloom or a denser phytoplankton bloom. We're in a different part of the country. Uh, you'll literally see it. It's that green color. The pond looks like pea soup instead of real clear, like our Georgia ponds are clear. When the water starts getting that green color, that's that plankton you're seeing in the water. So if okay, if you have a pond like in Georgia that you don't have a nutrient loading problem, you want to shift you can shift the nutrients. You have space to shift that nutrient load to the plankton. Okay, so if I get rid of the weeds like I just described, I don't have any. I keep the grass carp in there, keep it treated. Don't want any weeds. Don't have any weeds. It shifts. It bumps that pond to plankton, and instead of that pond being clear, it'll keep that green color. But in another part of the country where that green plankton is so thick that it's killing the fish, it's pulling oxygen out at night and killing your fish. There's so much nutrient load coming in. At that point, you're in the opposite situation. Now you need plants. You need plants coming in your watershed. You need plants around the edge of the pond. You need as many plants trying to get that nutrients out of the soil and out of the groundwater that's coming to that place, right? So it literally depends, and that can change just from watershed to watershed. Just like I've seen it in Georgia where like one pond across the street is just clear water, super low productivity, exactly what you'd expect from Georgia. But the pond across the street, super eutrophic because that pond used to be on like an old turkey farm, pig farm, chicken farm, something like that. Some agriculture was over there, and the just the nutrients, the phosphorus and the nitrogen in the soil is so high from that old farm being there for years that it behaves differently. It behaves like someplace else, like Midwest, where they do have those types of blooms, and riparian plants become really important because you need them and they'll plant them. Like in Chicago, they have companies that will plant plants around the ponds to try to get the phosphorus out of the water because the plankton is too dense. It kills their fish. So I don't know. It's kind of like leaning a motorcycle. Like we watch the races, those fast motorcycles that go at Daytona and they lean way over one way and then way over the other. That's kind of the same idea where we're leaning it. And when it's in Georgia, it's leaned way one way, and then Chicago, it's leaned way, way the other way with different issues. And that's what makes this so like kind of cool and complex. It's not something that people want to make this like these 1 minute videos, like you can summarize all this stuff in a minute or in a post or in a one video, 1 20-minute video to summarize all this stuff. And man, this is years and years of work. Jackson says he's got super stunted bass. Yeah, dude, that's pretty normal. Don't feel bad. Start harvesting them. You'll be fine. Yeah, dude. Mainstream's like, why do people argue with the facts and professionals? I don't know, man. I never did that. Although I will say this, like one of those shorts that's doing real well. It's almost on 1 million hits in about 2.5 months. And for a while there, it felt like that thing was like just drawing all this negativity to me, like I just feel like there's a lot of negative, like argumentative comments, negative comments, just non-supportive comments in one way or another. But then I kind of like broke it down and looked at the numbers. At that time, it had like 700,000 views and 700 comments. And, out of that, probably like half of them were negative. So 350, it's just they poured in all at the same time. So it just seemed like a tremendous amount. But when you look at the amount of people who've actually seen this stuff versus the amount of people who've got something negative to say, let them talk. Those people are, those people are those people. They're always going to do it. So, and at least their questions are usually long and rambling and full of word salad. So it drives the algorithm. Jackson's got a good question. How do you suggest stocking a pond that already has fish? Stunted bass and big bluegill, 1.5 acres. Just 1.5 acres. Just you can fix that without stocking anything. Usually, if it's got crappie, I would drain it and just kill everything in it and start all over. But if it doesn't have any crappie in it, just harvest the bass and harvest 20 pounds of bass, or in your an acre and a half, you're going to be like 31 pound bass right in there, about 30 pounds. And you might have to do that 2 years in a row, but just anything over 16 inches, throw back. They eat the smaller bass and help you out. And you'll probably be, if they're stunted, they're probably between 12 and 14. So those are the fish you want to keep. And on an acre and a half, like I said, about 30 of them. And you should, like by midsummer, like if you go out this spring and pull 30 out real quick, you'll see an immediate change around the edges. You'll see the natural, like there's less hunting pressure on the bluegill population. So you'll see more bluegill around the edges. And that's another part that I can't get anybody to listen to. You can stock your pond for free. Just harvest the bass that are eating up all the damn fish. That's how they got gone. The bass ate them. So here's an idea: take that 1 pound bass, yeet him up in the woods, put him in a fryer, put him in a cooler, give him to the neighbor, put him anywhere but back in the pond, and you're going to have 10 to 20 pounds of fish that survive that season that normally wouldn't if you didn't take that bass out. And that's the part of pond management that I cannot beat into these guys' heads, right? So when you go pull 30 bass out of a 1.5 acre pond, you're getting like millions of new fish being born in that don't have any hunting pressure on them. Like they've got so much better chance of survival, and you'll see it. Like you will watch, like just watch, just go take 30 fish out and watch what I'm saying. And like I said, you might have to take 30 out next year. Measure, you'll see the relative weights, the health of the fish. Just calculate your relative weights, and you'll see them fatten right up. If you want to speed that process up even more, especially on an acre and a half, feed your bluegill every day when it's warm. When the water's over 60, just feed all summer through the fall and stop in the winter and start again in the spring. And then they'll really explode with growth. That'll take you, that's like putting a turbo on it. Don't stop and start your feeding program. If you can't, dedicate, if you don't have the budget or whatever, that's cool. Don't feed them. You can manage them without it. But like I said, if you want to strap a turbo to it, put the feed to it every day. I've done that, Frank. It's you like the word salad? Yeah. I see a lot of word salad, bro. Word salad is part of my life. I don't know how you haven't heard that term in a while, because that is part of my existence right here, buddy. I am in This is actually the capital of word salad, in the free kingdom out here in Netflix or YouTube land. Word salad's the name of the game. But no, we have used those. Bass make great fish emulsion fertilizer. I've used many, many times. Several of my buddies use the fish that we harvest on some of the ponds. They crappie out or whatever, and if we can't get to eating them, or sometimes, especially with the crappie, they're in such poor condition. There's no meat on them to eat anyway. They're not worth cleaning. And like you can just fry them whole, and when you eat them, there's nothing hardly on them. They're just in really poor condition. And that's what I'm getting at. We don't want unhealthy fish. That drives me crazy to see such unhealthy fish, and then the nonsensical excuses people make about it being unhealthy. It's just like everything but the right reason. But that is an excellent fertilizer, fish emulsion. The mosquito treatment stuff, if you have a problem with that, James, it's that stuff is like quick. It'll kill fish instantly. It'll be right after they treat. if they mess up. If they don't mess up and put the treatment down, fine, and don't, just and with those mosquito stuff too, you really have to screw it up and just like hammer the water with it. If they just get a little bit around the edge or whatever, the fish will just move away from that stuff and it won't kill them. Fish are People don't realize that about fish. And here's another part of my experience. Part of my job is, all right. We've got to eradicate the fish. We don't When we start to let ponds over, we don't want any fish in there. That'll mess us up big time. So okay, go kill all the fish. Like, go get them all out. You don't want no fish in the pond. We want to stock it clean, and it's got fish in it. Go. Yeah, good luck. You're gonna need. I would, if I had any money at all, I would bet all of it that nobody listening to this can do that. It is hard. Kill all the fish. Yeah, right. You'll go find a few in there, and those few can mess you up. That takes some experience eradicating a fish population to the point you can restock a pond properly. Yeah, that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. And what I'm getting at is, I take the most toxic legal chemical rotenone, put it in water to intentionally kill the fish. You see what I'm saying? Like, we're going in with the intent to kill, and you can't get them out. Not all of them, not every single one. And again, it goes back to where you are and how the whole situation is working. But you would be amazed at how good at fish are being like, nope, that water sucks. We're going over here and living through it. They can live, man. They're good at it. Steve's got a question coming through. Oh, you're welcome, Jackson. I'm glad that helps you, man. Just drop any questions in the comments. I'll help you any way I can. But Steve's opinion on my pumpkin seeds, shell crackers, and warmouth. Well, generally, when you start seeing like pumpkin seeds around, like where I'm at, is not, they're a real common fish for most of the country. They're just not a real common fish for me. We don't have too many right around where I've been managing lakes. I have managed lakes with them, but when I see them, it's usually like that. It's usually like pumpkin seed, warmouth, crappie, golden shiner. It's in that kind of like swamp kind of lake where you've got, three different for five different species of catfish too. Like a type of a lake that just has a huge diversity of species. That's where I've seen the pumpkin seeds before. And with the warmouths too. So in that swamp kind of species. And so what I'm getting at is, it's hard to say in those types of environments, like what the one fish or another fish create this good or bad situation, because the species of fish are so diverse. It's really complicated. It is like, you can't tell that. There's no way to determine that. Um, where like with my pond stuff, I know, again, if I had bass and bluegill and I go and measure those relative weights, and then I have bass, bluegill, and crappie with just one extra fish, you can see the differences in those populations. You can see that one extra fish species, it being crappie, is not good for a pond environment, or green sunfish, not good for a pond environment, or red breast sunfish coming from our streams in Georgia, don't do well and kind of disrupt and create problems in a pond environment. And again, a pond environment is really not a natural environment. You can have fish that mix in really good and fish that don't fit at all, because this isn't natural, you know? Even the lake right here behind my house in Florida, even though I'm in Florida in lake country, that is a man-made reservoir right there. It's got a dam. So this mother nature will come and correct all theory out the window. You better hope the biologists know how to fix it, because they're the ones running the show. Oh, Jackson, yeah, man. If you're bringing in some bluegill to stock, I would recommend you get the biggest you can find. 4 to 6s is probably what they'll be, and get those bass the hell out of there, man. Those bass will waylay the crap out of those bluegill. But that's actually pretty good. Like if you're going to do a supplemental stocking like that, it will work. But get the bass out of there first, or you're just going to be feeding fish that you're throwing in, throwing in fish emulsion or throwing in the fryer or throwing wherever, and they will eat you up. I mean, that's the part dudes don't get. Those 4 fish right there. I'd like to see you to have those out because those 4 fish can absolutely decimate everything you bring in. That's the part the dudes don't get. Oh, you brought 10,000 bluegill in? Okay, well, tomorrow you're gonna have about 500 left because they're going in woozy. They're going in a little different. They're going in like trying to get their bearings, and they're going in with the lions, man. They're going in with the killers. And you don't see it. That's the thing. They spread out all over the pond really fast, and all I'm saying is on the job, you see me running, you don't see me stocking fish like that. You don't see me wasting money like that. I know where that money's going. It's going right down the toilet. Yes, bass are eating. Yes, bass are going. That's not a bad thing. But what you don't understand is how much a bass has to eat to grow. And when you look at that in money, you ain't got that much. You certainly don't want to have to spend that much. So don't create the environment so you don't have to spend that much. But me even pretending like you could spend, like you can't go get money and do what I did at Sugar Hill Outdoors. Money ain't gonna help you there. You ain't going 2 pounds a season with just on money. Not happening. Seen dudes try. Seen fools blow cash. Seen $10,000 in shad and thousands of dollars in crawfish, and I've seen it all, man. Tilapia, I've seen it, every bit of it, all of it, and not a one of them grew fish as fast as we just did. Not one ever in 30 years. Not one anywhere ever got their money out and beat me ever. Try to tell. They don't listen. Yeah, the rock bass can give you troubles for certain, Anthony. You can have problems with any of those types of predatory fish in your ponds for certain. I've seen that. My lord. Streams coming in. Jackson says he wants to add some cats and he wants automatic feeder. Well, again, there's some truth in all that, Jackson. I agree. And like we talked about earlier, I don't know if whoever's coming on new here, but we talked about it a minute ago. They'll spin things to sell them. You know what I mean? That's just the nature of the country we live in. But what you have to remember, Jackson, is if you have bass in the pond and catfish in a small pond like that one and a half, the catfish are going to take the feed quick and eat and grow quick. And I mean quick. Like this time next year, they'll be if you're feeding daily 5 pounds, um, they'll kind of hog the feed from the bluegill. Excuse me, and then you've got bigger catfish kind of bullying the other fish out of the way to get to the feed. And then once they are at that 5 pound range in a year or two, depending on how you're feeding, uh, they're competing with your bass, and then they start eating those bluegill. So for that reason, I don't have them in Sugar Hill Outdoors pond. I don't want them because I know I've got a feeder going, and I don't want catfish competing. Now, of course, we do have a stream, and there is a catfish pond above it, and there was a storm, and we have caught catfish out of the pond, and one of them has been 6 pounds, and that was a year ago. It grew 6 pounds in like 14 months in there. So we'll have a few catfish in our pond because of the stream and because of what happened upstream. that's okay. I'll manage around that. We pulled those fish out as we caught them. We don't return those back to the pond again because we've got like this genetics bass growth kind of thing going. It's really not a catfish pond. But say 3 years from now, we've kind of seen the genetics play out and the pond's doing what it wants to do, and Clint wants to add some channel cat. Sure, just throw some 8 to 10 inch channel cats in there that are big enough the bass can't get to them, and you can grow them out and their babies generally won't survive because they're slow swimmers and bass eat them up. And you generally just have to restock channel cats, every 5 to 10 years or so, however much you keep them out. But they mix in well with ponds. They do pretty good in ponds. If you want them in there, certainly, that is not one of the fish that I say is a bad for your pond, like a crappie or a green sunfish. Yeah, it's a lot. Steve's asking about tilapia and people's talking about ponds. Yeah, man, you'll see guys, they'll be advertising them because tilapia eat, they're omnivores, they'll eat algae and plants and insects too, I believe. I think it depends on the species, but uh in certain like North Carolina, I worked up there for many years. You can stock them up there for like algae control or weed control. Honestly, I stocked them a bunch of different places with the company I work with and never saw them control algae or weeds. We treated all the lakes that were stocked with tilapia every year the same as we treated them before. And one of two things happened. You stock $5 to $6 a piece tilapia in there and you watch the bass eat them like literally because they're a little like whitish pink fish going in there that just get drilled and they're gone for the rest of the year at $5 a meal. Or there's no bass in the system, so the tilapia can't get eaten. And then the tilapia go wild, spawn all summer, go crazy. But then in the fall, when it cools off, they're warm water fish and they die. So they all float and they're dead. You got a big stinking mess of tilapia floating. And even though you tell the people who you stock the pond for that the tilapia are sensitive to cold and die in the winter, they automatically assume some chemical got into the pond and killed all the fish. So I didn't enjoy selling tilapia or messing with tilapia in any way, shape, or form. And again, from my experience, have never seen them outgrow bluegill like I'm doing right now. Like I've never seen any like magic fish that you go buy from the hatchery that you put into your lake that creates fish growth. That's not how this works. Balance in the pond, understanding that 40 bass per acre is what got us to 2 pounds per season, and understanding how to measure the fish and understanding how to measure and what 40 pounds per acre measures out like. So when you measure the fish, all right, to have relative weights like this, I'm in the ballpark. If my relative weights start to slip, I've got to figure out why. Could be crappie, could be green sunfish, could be competitors. But if it's not competitors, then it's other bass in the pond, and that's my cue to start harvesting bass. But I don't know, just that's how it works. You know, you measure it, and then you adjust your slot limits, and you measure some more. And you collect data, and analyzing the data. That can be tricky, man. James wants to know, he's got an HOA board and properly vet. Actually, James, a lot of times I've worked on, if you just send me like contract review basis and stuff like that for HOAs that are new at this, I'll work as a consultant, and I'm not giving you a bid to give to manage the fishery. I'm giving you a bid to review the bids, like a consultant, and then give you the questions to ask and follow up with that way, and then see how they respond to questions. Let's see, how do you put this? if you give somebody a chance to cheat, they usually will, but an honest businessman won't. So when you see somebody, like from my perspective, I can see all the angles, so I can see where they get the opportunities to cheat, and I can point you in the right direction that way, I guess is the best way to put that. Um, I have no problem with somebody charging a premium for their service as long as they're providing a premium service. But I've seen a lot of guys get a great premium in this business and not provide very good service. So, and that can be done easily because they can be the only people available to a lot of folks. So they're performing, they don't have competition maybe sometimes, or at least they don't think they do. Yeah, sure, James, man. Hey, there's my man, Flipping Kicks. What's up? We were out there this weekend too. I stopped by when I was in town getting my truck, and we had a good conversation. I'm going to get Alex to come on, and we're going to kind of do a podcast format, talk about his pond, and he's an HOA, about 2.5 acres of water. Small budget, but he's got some money. He's got 3 or 4 grand to play with, and that was kind of my idea for this page was, helping dudes in real time. And we certainly have that, not quite as much as I expected, more fishermen than pond manager people, but that's cool. The fishermen can learn about the pond management, and it also helps with the fishing too. I feel truly does. Learning how the biology, all these fish works. I never saw anybody become a worse fisherman from learning fish biology. Not once. But yeah, that'll be a great, just in the field example out at it's called Emerald Lake, his little HOA. And ironically, not far from where I graduated high school, and one of the first places that called me in the 90s, God, it would have been like 97, 98. I actually stocked, I think I stocked a few grass carp in there, and then I gave a bid for the management, but they had like a shuffling of the HOA changed over, and I don't know, I never heard back from them on that. Never picked up like a full-time gig over there, but I certainly had a lot of full-time lake management jobs all around that area and have a good feel for managing ponds right around there. And I think he's got a special little place there. I mean, we've got crappie in there. That's nothing new. Most of them do. So that's disappointing, though. I'd like to not have them, but we're going to get a management strategy in place there and some harvest ideas in place there. And Flipping Kicks has got his directional sonar, the forward facing, that he's having great success, locating fish in that little pond with it. He feels like it's almost unfair. He can see them in there, and hey, that's good. But I don't know. I prefer so much of these conversations I have online are like these kind of hypothetical, like these guys are telling me what's going to happen, and I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make with this particular pod or live or whatever, is I am not telling you what I think is going to happen, like from an intellectual place of, well, this and that. I'm telling you what happened from watching, from draining the lake down and fixing it and managing lakes in the real world in real time. Like if you stock it like this and manage it like that, this is going to happen. And I know because I watched it and measured it, not some theoretical book knowledge place where this could happen or that could happen. No, this is, I'm talking about, like, I've been waist deep in the mud with the nets, pulling, catching the fish, measuring the fish, and determining, hey, these fish are really healthy and this pond looked really good before the drain failed, or, whatever caused our job, whatever created the situation for us to be on the job. But And I've seen the flip side of that coin, and the flip side of that coin is, hey, all the fish in here are completely unhealthy and don't look very good, and this pond has been completely mismanaged for several decades. That is the common thread you see in my world. And on top of that, you can say, this is the sad part. I can say, hey, these fish are unhealthy. This pond sucks and you need to fix it. And then they won't even do it, you know? And it's just like, you can't keep a dog in that kind of condition. You can't keep animals like that. Like, I don't know. I've seen some bad things with fish. Heck yeah, Flip and Kick said he's got the cheat code for sure, but it's a welcome one. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'd rather have it and not need it. Yeah, Cliff's. I'll read this too. I just sorry about the blanks. I can't get the gist of these questions and read properly until I read them quietly. But he's got a couple bodies of water, and they're managed by the county water authority. And how does he figure out who's managing them or if anybody's managing them? So I would check if you're looking for like any kind of management. You check the local DNR, every office. Like they'll probably have to do a couple electrofishing surveys a decade. Usually on most lakes, they usually catch them a couple of times. They usually don't get them annually, but they usually get them once or twice a decade. But you are correct. Many of these lakes are just kind of, and the bigger ones too. And again, you have to understand. I just told that man he has a 1.5 acre pond, and to correct his problem, he needs to go keep 30 bass. What if he's got a 1,500 acre lake or just 150 acres? Right? Let's just talk about like a 150 acre watershed pond. I can't do that math. I'm going to get the calculator. Times 21-pound bass per acre. You got a 150 acre lake and you want to correct the bass population. You got 3,000 bass you got to keep out of it this year, out of 150 acres of water. And you got probably going to have 3,000 bass to keep out of it again next year. So over the next 24 months, or actually not even that, this spring to next fall, you've got to keep 6,000 bass out of a 150 acre lake to make any difference at all in the 150 acre lake. If you go get 3,000 bass out of it, they just respawn. You haven't changed anything in that fish population. And I guess that's another thing that I never see these guys. These guys don't come from that place. I've never seen a guy. There's very rarely do you come on here and the guy goes, man, I had a 20-acre lake stunning with bass and fixed it. And I didn't realize how much killing I was going to have to do that. And it's like, yeah, no kidding, right? Because you just killed 800 fish and you've never in your life even considered killing one bass. And now you got a stack of them, literally 1,000 of them you got to stack up. So the point is, even on your big fisheries, like you start getting out into hundreds or thousands of acres of water, you keep all the fish you want, dude. People aren't keeping fish anymore. They're not harvesting. The bank beaters aren't keeping enough fish to knock any damage in them. They're not even keeping enough to manage them. Most of the big water lakes that I see, if they get a huge problem, there's nothing the lake manager, the biologist could have done about it anyway. Gill maggots, construction accidents with chemical spills or whatever, parasites and crazy stuff like that. It's kind of all out of your control. There's a limit to what we can control in lakes. They can get out of control. And yeah. But your bigger lakes will have cycles like that too. You'll see them where sometimes they'll cycle in and they'll be good fishing, then they'll cycle out, kind of be bad fishing, then they'll cycle back in and be good fishing. Your smaller lakes and ponds tend to get locked. They kind of get stalled out and stuck in a spot more. But the nice part about small lakes and ponds and small lakes is they're actually small enough for our content purposes here that if we did have a 10 acre or 20 acre lake, it is actually physically possible for, I mean, it's not really physically possible for me to go keep 6,000 fish in 2 years. I'm not going to be able to do that. So you're not going to see any results from me trying that. But if I got a 2 acre pond that's stunted and I go keep 75 bass out of it, the next season we'll be measuring the differences in relative weight and seeing a change in the weight just like that. So that's what I'm saying. Like, from a measurable difference perspective, ponds and small lakes are great because you can actually see the results. You have a chance to fix them. Once they get big, they're kind of do what they do. They're kind of locked into what they are. Yeah, 600-acre reservoir, and a smaller one is 90-acre reservoir, right? A 90-acre reservoir from in my world is huge. It's not very many private. Now, I'm not saying I had a few dozen that were at 90, 100 acres in size, but um, you're getting outside the scope of what's possible to even harvest at 90, 100 acres. I never saw private waters over harvested. People are not keeping that many fish anymore. Not 100 acres of water over harvested. Oh, sure, Cliff. You're welcome, man. Yeah, you can grill some bass, dude. If you want to keep some bass, you're not hurting anything. And if there's a few guys on the bank keeping them, eating them, that's cool too, man. Like, there's no reason to like shame people, or um you're not ruining anything. I don't know. I call them glitter boy, the glitter boat boys. You know who I'm talking about? Like, fishing $500 tournaments and $50,000 boats, and shame everybody for everything they do, and don't have a clue that they're even holding a bass that's 2.5 pounds underweight, whatever. But I don't know where I live. The folks that are down there on that fishing, they're down there right now. I guarantee it. There's a few people out there fishing in the river behind the dam down there because it throws out some good fish down there, and they're not doing that for any other reason but to feed their dang families. That's protein. That's organic protein. And that's another way to look at it too. You got pond, you can keep 10 to 20 pounds of bass per acre. Imagine this. Imagine you go into Whole Foods and you look down and you see organic bass fillets locally caught. How much do you think that would cost at Whole Foods? Organic fish fillets like that, local. This is exactly what they are. Good, clean, organic protein. You know, I eat a fish out of any pond in Georgia or Florida. They're not contaminated. I'll eat them. Never had a water test come back bad. Usually the water tests I had come back bad are around old industry, paper mills and factories and Superfund sites and stuff like that. It was my only experience with bad water tests. Oh well, Cliff's bringing up a good point. He says it's nuts. No one catches shit in the 90-acre lake, but it's supposedly part of the state's big bass program in Pennsylvania. Well, see, that is just the kind of place that I like to go, Cliff. You're talking about. I'll put it this way: I was at 250-acre lake in Georgia that's got a low bass population and puts off heavy fish, real heavy fish. It used to be near my old house, so I used to fish there a lot. I'd go out there. All the fish on my page, the one I'm holding up over there, has come from that place, public water. That's why I like to use those pictures because it's public water fish, not private. But um, the first thing that jumps out at me when you say it's supposedly trophy, but nobody catches anything, is that nobody catches anything. Yeah, no kidding. When you go into trophy bass management, you don't catch as many. I guarantee it. You're not that never are you going to put up numbers in a trophy bass lake. They're not there. That's what makes it a trophy bass lake. and you got to get in there and grind. So, for example, yes, I've gone to that lake, that 250-acre lake, and gone out there on a Saturday and caught an 8-pounder, and gone back the next day, 24 hours later, and caught another 8-pounder, right? But I've also gone to that lake and gone 20, at least 2-hour trips in a kayak 20 times, 2 to 4 or 5 hours, and zeroed every single trip, like skunked 20 trips in a row, right? Then you have that weekend where you have those 2 good fish, and then you go back to Skunk City again. So, um, that's the nature of the beast in trophy managed waters, and unless they're brand new, like the situation I've got right now, or any brand new reservoir that's less than 5 years old or 8 years old, right in there, you'll see brand new places just throw out stupid numbers of big fish, but that'll stop. That's just it's a natural process that goes away. Um, but no, that sounds to me like the kind of place that probably will be holding one if you're not catching many. Yep, Philip nailed it. Would you rather catch 2 3s or 1 6? That's pretty much it. Although generally what ends up happening most of the time is it's that 1 pound range. I would say if I had to throw out a general rule of thumb for everybody watching this forever, for the rest of your life, if you have a bass and you gilled it or kept it, killed it for accidentally or on purpose, whatever. But if you just are eliminated that, and it has a one, like a 1.0, as a weight to 1.9, or any bass with a one, you haven't hurt a thing. You can keep those all you want. They're easy to grow. They grow in a year to 12 inches in a pound. And that's normally where your problem lies. So any 1 pound fish, kind of, if you frame it this way, 1 pounders are your enemy in pond management and small lake management, but the bigger fish are not. The bigger fish are the ones we're putting back. And that term is called selective harvest, where we're selecting the smaller fish to harvest and returning the bigger fish to grow. And that strategy is how you manage a pond properly. That's how you manage a pond for 15 years and get it to produce the entire time. Because you understand some years the bass reproduction is too high and you got to manage that. Cliff, I promise you, man, go grind it out and take one of those big bellows gills, man. The 5.8. Do I have one here? On lakes like that, I'll go get those G-Crack baits, those bigger plastic baits. I've got a review back there on the bellows gill. I've got a couple of them on the page and how I fish them. I've pulled big bites in lakes like you're describing on that 5.8 bellows gill. Really done well on it. And that's the situation I'm looking for to use it, where you've got some good fish and you need a unique bait and to draw that strike, to get them to bite it, because the bigger fish are smarter, man. I mean, that's just how it is. They've been around the block and they're hard to catch. Yeah, man. Cliff, drag those things real slow, man. Just like put it on the reel and just creep the reel. Right, this time of year, I'll just be creeping the reel, man. Just drag that thing real slow on a steady creep, barely move it across the bottom. And then every once in a while, I'll rod tip it to give it a little hop, little fall, get a little vertical pattern in it. But yeah, those are good baits, dude. Southeastern Kayaks on a warpath out there. He's already got 100 pounds of bass out. That's good, man. Fry him up. Ooh, good luck with that knee surgery, bro. I hate that for you, man. That sucks. I hate surgeries. I had elbow surgery once. It was terrible. Do Jackson asking, do I recommend a mixture of copper nose and red ear or just one? Yes. Copper nose are bluegill, and normally a normal pond stocking is, and it's only 50 red ear per acre. It's not many red ear. Red ear or shell cracker get that name because they crack open snails, and those snails are host to parasites, and they're also additional protein that no other forage fish can access because no other forage fish can crack them open. Um, so we like this. We like the snail crackers, those red ear shell crackers, for that reason, because they're bringing another form of protein into our food chain that normally wouldn't be there without them. If that makes sense, they're transferring snail protein to bass forage for us, and no other fish in the lake can do that for us. So that's why we want them. But also, too, the red ear, that the snails are the host of the parasites, so that also helps reduce parasites. It helps keep our fish population healthier. So yes, we would want red ear, copper nose, and red ear. Or if you don't have copper nose, you just have regular, like, I don't know, whatever people want to call them, northern or native bluegill or anything. But copper nose is just a slightly different genetic strain of southern bluegill, and the fish hatchery guys figured out that they take feed a little bit easier. They're a little easier to feed train. So, and again, copper nose, everybody's heard it. Everybody's seen the media. It's just been pumped out. The Florida bass genes, it's been pumped out all over everywhere. You've seen all this genetic nonsense in the media, in the magazines, and online and everything. And it's just PR for sales, for selling fish. It's not science. I'll grow you fish. Go give me fish out of the ditch. I don't care about their genetics. You have to set them up in a balanced population. Until they're in a balanced population, you don't even know, they don't even express their genetic traits. They don't even, until you get because a bass can grow its whole life. So until it eats every day of its life, until it's in a balanced situation where it can consume food and grow every single day of its life and never stop growing, you don't know what its genetic potential is. My fish in Sugar Hill right now are reaching their genetic potential because they have lived in that environment this entire time. They've never stopped growing in a perfect situation. They're expressing their genetic potential. But you go get some stunted bass pond down the road there, that doesn't matter what the genetics of those fish are. You can go get the best genetics in the world. You can get the, you know, 2 30-pound bass spawn together and put them in. If you put them in stunted out, they're not growing. Their genetics won't matter. So balance is the key, boys. Just like we said, everybody wants to talk about fish habitat and the bass are skinny, so we're going to put brush piles. You can go stick as many sticks as you want down in the mud. It's not going to make your bass fatter. When your bass are skinny, that has to do with some sort of competition for the forage. Either they're competing amongst themselves or they're competing with some other competitor for it. But somewhere along the line, bass are such good predators. The only reason they're skinny is because there's not enough to eat. That's the best, easiest, simplest way to put that. Like, that bass is under these weights. There's not enough food there. The end. There's no other reason. They're that good at eating. Scroll back, make sure I didn't miss any questions. Try moving this thing out of my way. 1 hour and 20. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me and doing this, man. These lives are, well, there's 14 folks, 15 folks. Welcome aboard, everyone. They're getting bigger, and I feel like helping some folks. And we've got all our usual suspects in the comments too, but no, this really helps the hours to getting paid. Let's check that. Where are we at in the studio? All right, so the first one is there. See the blue line right there? I got to take it all the way out to the end. So these little lives, let's see, it's about 600 more hours and we'll qualify for memberships and something else. And then I still got to go to 4,000 hours to be qualified for full like commercial payments or whatever. Um, but we're only months away from that at this pace, it's all good. Southeastern Kayak says he forgot to tell me he started his feeding program on the brim. Hey, what's up, Tim? Oh, that's good, man. It sounds like that project's going the way it should be going. Yeah, just get them in the spring, and just for the record, Jackson, I don't introduce the crayfish. He's asking about introducing crawfish. I didn't do that, and the reason being is crawfish occur naturally, and the pond was there for a year with the bluegill in it, and I was feeding the bluegill and treating it just like I normally did. But I mean, we'd had lobsters for crawfish, already in the pond because there were no bass in the pond for that first growing season. Um, and another thing I learned is doing podcasts. I've been on a lot of them now, and one of them was Tackle Talk. This one here, um, it's called the Bait Breakdown, and he got a guy a lot smarter about crawfish and did it like an entire crawfish podcast. And I would check that one out before I went purchasing crawfish. The one thing that I took away from it, and the reason why I don't buy them is because you only buy crawfish from certain areas like Louisiana. There's only certain places. So that means there's only certain species. And what I took away from his talk, the number one thing I took away from it was they're still identifying species of crawfish. Like they haven't even identified them all. So they don't really know which one is more productive than another one bass forage wise, right? Like maybe one species of crawfish is better at being bass forage than another. And so what I'm getting at is if that's the case, and if you want to play it safe and think like a scientist, you're better off just using your native crawfish at whatever is there that occurs naturally in your environment and not bringing some crawfish from some other place in. Um, it could be in a situation where you put that other crawfish in there and it doesn't spawn as much. It displaces your crawfish that are producing more forage, is what I'm getting at, if that makes sense. So for that reason, and I've never really been, again, this whole talk has been about how I don't really stock forage, and I don't. I don't buy crawfish and stock them for my fish. I'm just you might as well take that money and light it on fire. You want to use money wisely, put it in the feed the bluegill, get them growing good, feed them daily. That's how you transition money to bass growth as cost effectively as possible. If you're taking money and buying forage and trying to get bass to grow by feeding them, that is using your money in the least cost effective way possible. No, I don't. Southeastern's coming in with the introducing shiners to help the bass. Not really. And again, it's kind of reverse logic because again, people want to treat ponds like lakes. But what happens is when you put the shiners in the pond, shiners only spawn once a season. Bluegill spawn multiple times a season. So you're displacing. Say you have 100, just for easy math. Say you have 100 pounds of forage per acre that pond can support. Well, if you have bluegill only or bluegill and red ear, right? Those two fish like normal, all right, that's your 100 pounds of fish per acre. If you put shiner in there and that displaces a third of the bluegill, well, now you have 70 pounds of bluegill and 30 pounds of shiner. That 30% of the fish population only spawns once a year. you've actually decreased the amount of forage going into that lake by adding another fish. You see how that works? It would have produced more forage to your bass had you not put the shiners in it. I can't get anybody to understand that one. But that's exactly how I measured it. That's not, again, I'm not telling you about something I think's going to happen. I'm telling you about something I measured happen. Guys took my pond, put shiners in it, and screwed it up. That's why they're not in my pond. Did you see me put shiners in there? For a reason. Done this, got this t-shirt a couple hundred times. Yeah, James, crawfish colors can be crazy. Don't get married to any of them. I've seen that. They'll be every color in the rainbow in the same pond, in the same stream. Crazy. Brown, orange, chartreuse, crazy colors. Green, green pumpkin, red. Yeah, man. Flipping Kicks will get it because he's doing it in real time too, man. He's the one out there catching the fish. He's out there putting in the effort. He's out there figuring out, okay, I went out there and caught all these crappie, and he's the one keeping an eye out for his bass reproduction. He's getting real good field experience that, I mean, you really can't replace that. That's why I'm filming it, because you can't replace field experience. You can learn about it in the book all you want to. Look at the diagrams. I can go get all the stuff for you. It won't stick. Go out there and do it, though. It'll stick then. It'll certainly stick when you go spend $3,000 or $4,000 that don't work. You'll figure it out then. Yeah, Robert, it's hard to explain because you don't get guys to listen to you, but I've seen it a bunch of times. And actually, usually what happens is I've seen guys put shiners in ponds, and it either does that or it's kind of like not that great, or the other thing I've noted, it goes the other way and the shiners just vanish. It's like the bass just waste them and they're gone and they never come back. And I don't know what environmentally causes that, or if it's a weather thing, because generally the shiners occur naturally a little further south of me, and the ones where I've seen them vanish were in the northern part of Georgia ponds. The southern part of Georgia ponds will have shiners, but the northern parts sometimes they won't, mostly. But I've never seen a pond where you do a bunch of diversity like that. And that's what guys do. They get that pond and they go, oh, we're going to put every fish in the river in there. Man, you just screwed up. Like, you just completely screwed up. Like, you should not have done that, because a pond is not a river and it's not a lake and it's not managed like either one. And man, just trying to get guys to listen to that. Jackson's got a question about fathead minnows. No, their fatheads are used in new pond construction. I have used them before on new ponds, and they're about that big, and they're really slow swimmers. They can't get away from bass. So you can put them in, like when I first stocked this pond and I knew I was stocking fingerling bass, you can put the fatheads in then. And when the fingerling bass go, they get about, I don't know, 5 inches long or so, they get to where they can eat those fatheads. So from, like, say 4 to 5 inches, bass just will gorge themselves on those fatheads because they can catch them easy. But after that first initial stocking of bass, those fatheads don't really mean anything to me anymore, because the bass that get born in next year are probably all going to get eaten by their parents and their siblings anyway. And it's a different dynamic is what I'm getting at. And also too, bass need to consume a ton of fish. Like, huge bass are not eating fathead minnows and surviving, and growing. If a huge bass is trying to make a living on fathead minnows, he's big bass eat big meals like as big as your hand. You know, that's what the big mouth is for. Fathead minnows are not forage for 5+ pound bass. They're not even looking at that. They burn more energy trying to catch it than they do by catching it. You know, it's not cost effective. You know, just from an energy standpoint, it's like running a marathon to eat an M&M. You're just not. They won't even move for that. And I think too, going back to what we were talking about with the bigger baits, that's what triggers those bigger bass is they can sense that bigger bait is has more calories, it's bigger, it has a larger profile. It just instinctively knows that's worth going after because it's big and injured. And that's I think what gets that bellows gill to work so well because it just triggers that it's worth it kind of instinct. That's a big bait for me to eat. I'm gonna try to get that. I appreciate all your efforts out there, Philip, man. I really do. You've done well in educating people and all this stuff as good as myself or anybody I've ever seen, really. And we'll just keep after it, boys. That's all you can do. It's easy math, and if you get people to listen, it makes perfect sense. It's not hard, it's not complicated. It is illogical, like I think it probably seems illogical because of the way it's been framed on TV all these years is wrong. Um, but like I said, once you film it and put it on YouTube, we get rid of all that logic real quick. The next couple years are going to be real interesting for content purposes and blowing up misinformation. Noted, Frank. You are correct. I am a sucker for an M&M myself. Although I've cut the sugar down a good bit. I've lost a little bit of weight, boys. Actually, 42 pounds. I've been cycling and doing some intermittent fasting. If anybody's ever done any of that, but Ken, welcome in, man. It's been an hour and a half, and my throat's getting sore. I've been running my mouth again. I'm nursing what's left of the backwash in this coffee mug. I'll hang out for a second. I don't have anything else to add to that. 17 people, golly, that might be a record. Appreciate you guys hanging out. If you have any questions, throw them up. I'm just going to chill for a minute or two, and then I don't know, maybe cook something. It was a good trip back to Georgia. Oh, you're welcome, Jackson. I'm glad it helps, man. I really am. It's been rewarding doing this, helping folks out online. I did mention it, today a little bit about some negativity we've endured, but that happens on the internet. For the most part, this has been one of the more rewarding experiences of my life. And I've really enjoyed doing this and hope it turns into a paying gig. I feel like I didn't understand social media when I first got going. It's been about a year too long, probably doing daily work on Instagram. Instagram was misleading in that they did pay us for a while, then they quit. That was disheartening because I had a real good run on Instagram for some reason, but I just switched my workflow up, started going to YouTube every day, started doing this every week, and really engaging with YouTube shorts 4 or 5 times a week, and just trying to do daily stuff, or at least as much as I can on YouTube, and put that effort over here. And I've been rewarded greatly. I think the trick to beating the algorithm is just being on here every day, trying to post something every day, good, bad, or indifferent. Just feed the monkey, and it'll reward you. But I also think, we've got some really unique information. I mean, even for my business and what I've done over the last, 30 years, this is really unique project that we got going. Um, and you can't replicate that kind of content, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Hey, Bob, I appreciate you, man. He says he's watching the videos and hoping to get paid. Yeah, man, I think it will, dude. I really do. I got a lot of confidence. I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't confident that it would. And even if it doesn't, just if you look at the be a pessimist and say it doesn't, and it stalls out at 10,000 viewers or whatever, and it never registers for a dime. I don't care. I mean, I like it. I like talking about this stuff. I talk about this stuff all the time anyway, and anybody who will listen. So I'll still be on here doing it. It won't. If I had one person, there's 16 people here. I'd be sitting here talking to one person. Hell, I sit here and talk to no people sometimes. There's 18 people. We're setting records, boys. Records, I tell you. I don't know, man. But I think the content's pretty good. I don't think anybody else online has anything close to it, really. But maybe I'm biased. I try to do as good as I can, though. That's all I can do. I just control what I can control. And I was thinking about this. I saw this in like this Zen thing, man, talking about competition being it's really more of a hindrance than it is a benefit to anybody. And I kind of agree with that because I have some dudes that come on here talking being like competitive with me, like maybe other lake managers or other creators or something that have a competitive tone. It's such a waste of time. Like what I'm doing is not a fishing tournament. It's not a competition. This is not a game to me. Um, what I'm doing is trying to promote health and fisheries. And again, it's not a contest. It's not a game. It's not a joke. I'm not kidding. I certainly try not to offend anyone, but at the same time, I certainly don't. I'm not gonna tell them what they want to hear in lieu of what I know is a true fact that they would need to manage their pond, or that somebody else might be watching and need to manage their pond. Telling people what they want to hear isn't going to help. And unfortunately, have to do that sometimes because of the way things are portrayed in media, catch and release, things like that. I'll be the bad guy sometimes. Cliff says it's wealth of knowledge, appreciates it. I appreciate you, man. I think it will, man. I really do. I wouldn't be doing it honestly if I didn't think I could. And actually I do. I mean, I did get a $15 check from Facebook this month. So, I don't know where I'm going to retire to, maybe Spain or Portugal. Um, nah, it's all right. I got San Diego blunt smokers, man. Sounds like a good time. I like San Diego. Went tuna fishing off the coast of San Diego one time. Cool town. I dig it. Yeah, man. It's an interesting how many people like and where in the world people are, man. It's Japan, Brazil. I've talked to South Africa. It's amazing the reach that this thing will give you once it gets going. It's amazing. And like I said, really rewarding. I've enjoyed it. I'll keep doing it, whether it pays me or not, really. Yeah, right. Frank. Frank's always good for the comic relief. I got to get a new plug. I don't like this one. You guys got any recommendations for earpieces? This is just an old one. It plugs in the mic. It does okay, but If it wasn't for Oliver, you wouldn't know. Oh, you wouldn't know me? Yeah, man. Oliver's cool, a cool guy, man. He's helped me a lot. There's been a lot of dudes that have helped me a lot, actually. I could do shout out for, man, like Tackle Talk and Mossy Oak Gamekeepers and Oliver. Shoot, even Fishing with Flair Kid on YouTube and Ben Milliken and shoot, man, I've had the Mike Book over at Bullshad, G Crack Boys over there. I'm sorry if I even left you out and you've helped the page. I've been really fortunate that way, and glad to help other. And I was planned by me. I calculated that. I was like, if these dudes can see the truth, then they're gonna see that catch and release is kind of bogus and misleading and leading us down the wrong path if we want big bass. And then that's going to create confrontation on their pages where you get the back and forth, and that's actually good because that's what gets the algorithm fired up and gets that information shared everywhere. So you have to endure that negativity backlash from the dudes that are, just misinformed by just, mainstream media or regular TV or whatever you want to call it. It's just a misinformation deal where the guys doing it just don't have this kind of knowledge, you know? Oh yeah, Bass After Dark. That's a good program. I saw that. Ken Duke and Brian the Carpenter's followed the page a long time, man. He's a cool guy. I've met him. I met him at the Bassmaster Classic a couple years ago. He's a nice dude. I think he does his Mike Iaconelli stuff too. Yeah, I know Brian. He's a nice guy. This has been very rewarding. I've met so many people, and just it's been cool. Like I said, there's certainly online you're gonna face some criticisms and negativities, but for the most part, this has been great. Well, except for that comment. That guy's mad, but everybody else is happy. Some dude's always got to be mad somewhere. That's like a rule. For every what was it, Frank? Every one good comment, you get 10 bad ones. Not 10, probably like 3 or 5 or 10. Anyway, let me double check my question box and make sure I didn't miss anyone. Doesn't look like it. All right, boys. I am not going to rattle on this week. But speaking of Mike, I saw Mike at the fishing show in Cartersville, Georgia last weekend. I was up there, and I think he's going to be a guest on this live. So watch for that special guest. And I'm lining up some other special guests to have on too, and turn this more into a podcast instead of me just running my mouth. Andrew from Tackle Talk has agreed to come on, and Andrew Flair from YouTube has agreed to do some stuff. Maybe I can get him on. He's got a pond, and I've done a little bit of consulting with him about it. He's doing some pond content. So any pond content guys, online, I'll be glad to help them. Again, it's not a competition for me. If I can help them grow their fish a little bit better, hey, that just helps the page too, Anyway, I appreciate you guys for joining me again this week, and I'll be back, say Monday, probably next Sunday. Just plan to do it Sunday around 7. Appreciate it, Ken. Thanks, guys. See you next week. Where is the end? There's the end. End stream.